Microphones on, please.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call when you're ready.
Barkle,
Here.
Loest,
Here.
Kettering, Michael, Nelson,
Here.
Weiss,
Here.
Clark.
Right. Everybody got to go over the previous meeting's minutes. If there's no changes, I need a motion to approve those minutes.
I make a motion.
Second, Loest.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Is there anything to be added to the agenda, or is there anything you want to drop off, Bill?
Yep, the Stoudenmeyer plat. They guarantee me next meeting it will be ready.
Okay.
So we'll remove that.
Any other additions, subtractions? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Loest.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. Conflict of interest declarations, we can start with Kathy.
None. Nelson, none.
Barkle, none.
On the, and I don't think this is a big deal, but I am going to mention it, there's a Brandt application. They put bees in our property. We don't get paid any rent for it or anything. I just wanted to make mention that they do use our property for some of their bees. Unless someone thinks I need to recuse myself for that.
But not on this parcel.
Not on this parcel, no, just their business.
No, I don't think there's an issue as long as the applicant doesn't have an issue. All right.
You want to go ahead and do a couple plats while we have time?
Yep, we could take care of a few. So you're starting with the Bardling.
Bartling, yep. And all they're doing is combining two lots into one. These were originally two separate lots combined into one.
Where is that located?
This is just off Kaiser Road. Let's see here. You know, we're at the top of 445th and Kaiser Road. Bird Dog Road, or Bird Dog Drive goes right down here. This is where the storage units are,
Okay.
north of Cottonwood. They go off Kaiser and then down here on Bird Dog.
So it's like an R1 or something?
R2.
R2.
I think they just wanted to build a bigger house in the middle, so.
All right, unless there's any concerns, I'd entertain a motion to approve the plat.
Motion to approve, Loest.
Second, Nelson.
All right, ready for a vote when you are, Bill?
Barkle,
Yes.
Loest,
Yes.
Kettering,
Yes.
Michael, Nelson,
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
All right. Go on to the McDonald plat.
The next one is just 513, article, or second 513, Homestead, Farmstead.
Are you looking for the map? There we go.
So they are located in this corner of 34 in Mayfield. There were 30-some acres, so they took all the buildings, trees, and the house, platted it off into 9.535 acres, and they have about 21 left over in that parcel.
There's no concerns, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion. Second.
right, I have a motion and a second. Vote when you're ready, Bill.
Barkle,
Yes.
Loest,
Yes.
Kettering,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
All right, it is 7:05. Let's save the last plat till after the rezone. So we are on to the Brant rezone. Applicant is requesting to rezone a parcel that is dual zoned rural transitional and moderate density residential to moderate density residential per Article 18, Section 1809, and Article 20, Section 2003. Said property is legally described as the west 538.5 feet of the south 370.28 feet of the north 489.28 feet, lying adjacent to Planks Addition and lots 15, 16, and 17. And Planks Addition is platted in Book S7, page 77B, on Section 4, Township 93 North, Range 56 West of the 5th PM, Yankton County, South Dakota. The 911 address is 2605 Deer Boulevard in Yankton, South Dakota.
All right, so they have 11.19 acres. And they bought this pre-ordinance, so they've been there since about 2001, I believe. There's a main residence here. Then they have buildings back here where they do they raise bees, raise honey. What they would like to do is be able to put a second house back here for their retirement as their son takes over the business and moves up here. And everything around it, that zone is moderate density residential. We're trying to eliminate rural transitional, so that's what we asked for.
Is there currently a CUP or anything for operating the business?
No, because they're started before the ordinance.
They were pre-ordinance.
Yep.
Because I looked at, because moderate density, you can't have essentially businesses. Low density you can. And then ag you can.
But it's not in compliance with RT,
Right.
so it brings it more into compliance going residential.
Okay, and then you can build the second home without a CUP, or do
Yep.
you have to have a CUP for a second home?
No, they would have enough acres, as long as they have enough acres for each, and they have 11 acres.
Each one as the primary,
Yep.
the second primary.
So they would be able to build a second
Because
one just a
moderate's
permit.
one, right?
What's that?
Moderate's 1 acre.
1 acre, yep.
Yeah,
So they'd have plenty of room.
okay.
So how would that work if they want to expand the business or do anything there? Do they have to get a
If they have
CUP?
to expand, they'd have to get a conditional use permit to expand. They can continue doing what they're doing. We went through this, but if they want to
Okay.
add anything, expand, they'll have to get a CUP.
I just want to make sure the public is clear on why this is okay and,
I agree.
okay.
And Brant's are here if you want to ask him any questions.
You guys want to come up and say anything about it, or?
I think Bill explained it well.
Okay.
We have a basic floor plan right now, what we want to build back there. And it's like you said, we've been doing a lot to the property and want to stay there as long as we can, but our son is taking over and so it's just best that he would be living in the house. And it's also a very big house and he has a family and so it'd be best for him, so we want to stay there.
It's also super nice to have grandparents across the driveway, having experience to that.
Where else would you want to live? Besides like this.
That's who I assume is with you, right?
These are visiting, our grandparents.
Oh, they're-
These are
okay.
visiting, but, my son that is doing,
Yeah.
he lived just two houses away, he wants to sell that to his.
And they're not here.
Oh, yeah.
4 years and 4 months.
Do you need to ask for public?
I guess, yeah, I would ask for public comment. I don't see any, but just in case somebody's hiding in the hallway. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. So,
1503.
all right, should we go through the findings of fact checklist? Okay, so we got all the documents, fees. I'm assuming, Bill, you got that taken care of?
Yes.
Then, let's see. We've got the request made out, everything. We're on to, we had the notice. Public hearing isn't right now. So I guess the reasons set forth for the application to justify the recommendation. We do have moderate density right there adjoining. Part of the parcel is already moderate density. Rural transitional is looking to move away from RT into something else, so I guess it does make it more conforming than it currently is there. The amendment would make it reasonable to use the land for what they want. And they do understand that if they want to do anything with the business side of it, then that's going to make them
Yep.
have to come in for a conditional use permit.
Yes.
It is pretty much a row of housing all the way along there, so it would be more conformity with the area. Didn't get any concerns from the neighborhood or
No, not one.
let's see.
Yeah, very positive response.
So I guess to make them able to use the property the way they want to, we'd have to do the rezone for number 6. For number 7, let's see. I guess it's reasons stated so far, again, for conforms with our zoning ordinance following the process laid out. None of the ingress, egress is changing, parking, refuse, utilities, none of that is changing. Screening, signs, any of that. And I guess I don't foresee any conditions or anything needed for this amendment. Anything anybody wants to add?
You ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
I would move approval of the rezone based on findings of fact.
Second.
All right. I've got a motion and a second. We can vote when you're ready, Bill.
Barkle,
Yes.
Loest,
Yes.
Kettering. Yes. Nelson,
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
All right. Motion is approved. So the rezone has been recommended. So we already took care of the Bartling plat, McDonald plat. We're on to the Bender plat. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Oops. Too far. All right, so this parcel is located, this is the motorsports on the north side of, or north side of 52. And they are just platting off a portion, oop, I went a little too far, to sell to the neighbor. So they left 2 acres here, got a little over 4 acres here, and just divided it. access is through here. This, and the person buying this owns this, and this also, so.
So the lot 1, 2, 3 is all owned by the same person that's gonna buy tract 1?
Yeah, and this is actually into the rough terrain of that hill. I think he actually wanted the dirt out of it.
Mm.
But, yep.
And that's all R1 or
R2.
R2?
Would you scroll up a little bit so we can see the bottom of that?
Here's 52.
So is there concern when we make a new plat that technically if they sold that, I mean, they can say, well, we're gonna sell it to our neighbors, but it might fall through, and they sell it to someone else, and that plat does not have access? Are there?
There's a dedicated access here.
Yeah, but not to track 1.
Yeah, he would have to give him access, an easement.
Correct. So, I mean, are we required to make sure that on there, that, yeah, there's access even though they're giving it to themselves, that in the future? Because that's a lot that can be sold once it's made. I didn't know if there's any law.
We
I told
asked-
them to put it on there
Yeah.
before we got it.
So it was mentioned already that it needs to be on there, because I think once we start doing lots like, I mean, I could come in and say, well, I'm gonna sell this chunk to my neighbors, and then we get into it, and then I've got a little chunk of land in the center of my property that I could sell to anybody, but they can't use it, cause they technically don't have access.
That was my point too. Like you said, I mean, it can be done. They could just give them an easement when the time came, but, yeah, I don't know why he didn't put it on the plat.
I would assume that anybody that wanted to buy it would be savvy enough to figure out they need an easement or something, but
Well, true. But, I don't know, it just, for some reason, I had in my head that there was some kind of a law somewhere, but I can't recall it now.
By statute, yeah, a parcel has to have access to it.
And
But
who's,
since he owns all the property, they just think that it's, well, I can access it from wherever I want.
right? So who's in charge of enforcing the law? Probably the people who approved the plat. I don't know. That seems like a interesting situation.
so has tract 1 actually been sold already or not?
No, they can't sell it until we
Oh,
approve the
until we-
plat because it's not, it doesn't exist, actually.
Right.
And he has access to it, so, you know, that's why they didn't, like Gary said, they didn't make a deal of it, because he has access. Now, if they change ownership, then, like you said, whoever buys it is gonna have to work out.
Then they would be coming in for a replat or,
Well, they could
Oh,
just
no,
file
they
an
could just
easement.
file an
Just
easement.
file an easement. But if your preference is that,
I guess as presented, they would have access based on who the two parties are. And I guess my feelings would be that it'd be on a potential future buyer to figure out that they need an easement if something ever came up like that, but guess unless anybody else has any strong feelings on it, I would entertain a motion to approve it as presented. We got a motion by Dawn to approve,
I'll second.
second by Nelson. We can vote when you're ready unless anybody wants to add anything. Go ahead.
Barkle,
Yes.
Loest,
No.
Kettering. Nelson,
Yes.
Weiss.
Yes.
All right, motion carried. Next up on the agenda is ordinance discussion, definitions, Article 5, Article 10, Article 29.
I think there's only one change in definitions and some additions. The city ETJ definition.
I saw in the definitions, we still have the building mounted thing.
Yeah, those need to be removed.
That's what I was thinking.
We're hitting that. Page 31. So you want the building mounted removed?
Yep, so those two definitions need to be removed, because we've decided not to use those anymore. And I think there's two more. One of them has to be, so the solar energy is probably fine. The solar energy farms needs to be removed too, because we don't use the word farm anywhere for that. So 3 of the 4 need to be completely removed.
Then we need a definition for a solar energy system.
Yep, and currently, that is now listed in Article 29, and that was on my list to ask for discussion. Should that definition be put here? And because I struggle, with, we have little definitions here and there, and versus just having one big definition list. And I know the wind system has definitions in the wind, and the tower probably does too. And so is it good etiquette to list them all up front? And instead of listing them, because right now we've got 4 definitions listed in 2901. Agrivoltaics, the CSTs, the solar energy is listed there, and then the SECS, which is our one definition for what a solar energy conversion system is. So I don't know, does anybody have thoughts on that? Should all 4 of those definitions go up here in the big definition list? And then we don't have a definitions in Article 29.
I'd rather have all the definitions in one spot.
Okay, so.
Yep.
So in that case, all 4 of these can go, essentially, and then the 4 that are listed in definitions, as long as everybody's okay with those, should go to the front.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess it's on the list to go on to wind energy and probably towers after that at some point. And we can make those.
Remove them at that.
At
Yeah.
that time, okay, and then we just try, then you're not hunting and getting the document and searching for a word and, okay, perfect,
Sounds good to me.
okay.
Article 5, we have added to utility facilities under 50 kilowatts and personal building mounted. Do you want to remove that?
So I had a problem with that because the way it reads to me, there's utility facilities under 50 kilowatts. So then what exactly does that mean? Like you have something like the what do you call it? The transformer station here down Deer Boulevard. Yeah, so what they're putting in, it qualified under utility facilities, but then how does that fit into this? Because this seems pretty specific. Or if you're gonna say the 50 kilowatt thing, then something
Didn't we
like that is out.
Talk about switching that to the end, so solar energy conversion systems under 50 kilowatts.
Alternating current, yep, that should be number 14. So I think number 8 should just say utility facilities. And then you'll have a number 14 that has solar energy conversion systems under 50 kilowatts alternating current. And that, we are allowing that everywhere, in every zone, correct?
Right.
So that wording should be in every zone. All 3 residential. If we want to do it in RT, it should be in the commercial. It should be in every zone. Essentially, wherever you see utility facilities listed as a permitted use, you should have SECS under 50.
Right.
And that makes it clear that if you can do it under 50, if CUP doesn't say over 50, you can't do over 50.
Is there a way to add that to definitions so we don't have to add it to each one?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I'd be very clear about it, and then you don't have to assume things. The worst thing in zoning is to assume.
Yeah, it should be, it's hard.
Are you laughing, Don? Because you know what assume means.
Oh, yeah.
So, so that would be in ag and then the commercial one as well. It needs to be listed, and then every other one. And I think the next part in ag is the CUP section, and that one is worded incorrectly. However, number 26 under commercial in CUP is worded correctly. So the wording for commercial CUP should be used in the ag too, because that clearly states solar energy conversion systems 50 kilowatts alternating current and higher pursuant to Article 29. So that wording should be in the ag CUP. And right now it's listed as number 40.
So number 40, shouldn't you want to use the wording from which one?
From the
1007.
commercial CUP 20, number 26.
Okay.
And that's the new wording there. And then everything's consistent.
So the number 27 under commercial also needs to, on the permitted
Yeah, that
uses,
needs,
that needs to be
that needs to
reworded.
be just utilities, and then whatever the, and then add it to the bottom there,
36.
And we
that
need
one
to-
that's under 50.
Yeah, and you need to remove like the building mounted and that's.
Yes, all that, it should just leave utility facilities alone, cause your point about, all of the electrical grid system, I mean, there's a lot of things that qualify as a utility facility, and we don't wanna get in the middle of that with this.
That's good.
So, I think that was it on Article 5 and 10.
Article 29. You want to take these four and move them into definitions, correct?
Correct.
Could you go back up, please?
Solar energy you're defining as radiant energy received from the sun in the form of heat. I would narrow that down to thermal solar energy. If it's a radiant collector, I would just define, just put thermal solar energy discriminator in there, so you know you're talking about thermal.
Oh, okay, in front of us, so.
In front of, yeah, thermal solar energy is a radiant heat collector from the sun, not electrical.
on time, Dennis.
Right. Anything else?
Oops.
So with 29, this might get complicated, but looking at that, it just seems very, lots of things in lots of different areas that aren't really related, for example, like the first part. So I'm assuming that everything in 29 after this, it says conditional use permit application requirement, all that after that is required for the CUP. So that information's got to come before us first, right? And then it'll go on to okay. With all of this, is there any way we could put it into like 3 sections and so like the first section would just be relating to the site design, height design requirements, things like that. Because right now, as it reads, you have the site design, but then you go into soil erosion, inventory of endangered species. I see those more as, like a report or a study, because then, and then when you go on to the design requirements, there's, soil erosion sediment control. I see that more as a plan. What are you going to do? Ground cover. And so is it possible to have like 3 sections? Like the first one is just on the design, height requirements, things, the specs, and then there's another section that talks about the plans, the studies, like the wildlife study, water study, aviation, endangered species. And then the last section could be like on just the agreements, like the road maintenance agreement, the decommissioning, power purchase, so that they're more, everything that kind of goes together is put together in, as we lay it out. Does everybody kind of figure out what I'm saying? Because right now, it just, like the first part, you're talking about site design, and then you go into soil erosion, but then back farther, you're talking about ground cut, it just, could we put all that together? Yeah, liability insurance would go under agreements, things like that. Signage would go into your design. And noise would be a study or a plan or. Is that clear as mud?
I get it.
Do you get it? So you could put like additional requirements that are needed, then you could do your setbacks, you could do your height for fencing, your lighting, your signage.
Yeah, I think I know what you're.
Do you see what I'm kind of getting at?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, for me, it seems like we have this section of what we have for conditional use permit application requirements. So to me, it almost reads like follow that list A through L, and then we can do the application and have it presented here, and then it almost seems like, well, after the fact, here's the design requirements. To me, it should be kind of like, I don't know, more clear that in order to do the application, you need to meet these requirements, and some
Right.
of them overlap between that A through L and the design requirements, and some of them are totally different.
Mm-hmm.
like for instance, we have in the design requirements, we have a section, or in the decommissioning plan, there's like financial resources and stuff, but then, I guess that doesn't make it into here. I guess that would be under the decommissioning plan. I guess it's just not quite, it seems like there's two different parts and two different sections instead of it being together.
Mm-hmm,
So would it help if you start with the design requirement
yep.
and then essentially A through L?
Because
Would be design
because I
requirements.
agree. I would like to see like the site diagram, the site diagram, to have everything that deals with, looking at a design, and they've got everything showing exactly how, how it's going to be designed, what it's going to look like. And then later on in this, have talking about, another section talking about wildlife and the, drainage and,
So Lauren, if I understand you
Yep.
right, you want A and B and C as one part, D, E, F as a second part, and then G through L?
no, I think all of them can be, I'm talking so part C there, all of those I think are fine because they deal with the design. That it's the boundary, the location of existing area structures, the point of access, the topography. It's getting down to soil erosion and sediment control. I'd like to put that in a different section.
Right.
You
I
see-
meant
you-
the large.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so
Oh,
these-
okay, gotcha,
These
yes.
three would be one.
Yes.
A, B, and C up here would be one. D, E, and F down here would be one, and then C
Yes.
through L would be one.
Yeah, so like your decommissioning, liability insurance, anything where you have an agreement, where you've got some legal stuff that would be nice to have that all in one section. I guess I'm a very logical thinker, so it'd be nice to have those all together in one.
So I think if I understand what you're saying, design requirements are essentially A through K.
Yes.
And then when you get to aviation, we can just insert a title there and say agreements/studies. And that would be a new heading. And then you have aviation protection, which means you need to work with FAA. You've got endangered species, you've got a road maintenance agreement, you've got a power purchase agreement. And then after O, we could make decommissioning its own heading at that point. So then you've got
Yep.
a design requirement heading, you've got an agreements /studies, you've got a decommissioning heading, and then all of that flows in there, and the liability insurance would be under that too, and the indemnity, and that would take care of all of those.
Yep.
So now, as far as the conditional use permit application and then facility setback requirement, so that would be a fourth heading. Where would you want that? Would you want that after design requirements, before agreements?
I would want that before, because you would want to put in there, that would be, you gotta have setbacks, you gotta have, if your fencing has to be a certain height, your lighting's gotta be a certain,
Yeah, that would
type,
be part of the design, I would
signage.
think. We're right next to the design.
Okay, so
Yep.
design is 1, setbacks are 2, agreements are 3, and decommissioning would be 4.
Yep.
And those are your 4 bolded
Yep.
sections,
And then you could get rid of
And
this whole
then-
A through L thing up in the top here,
A through L.
under the conditional
Oh,
use.
no, because, just because they're doing it, you're not saying they have to present that. I mean,
Okay.
nowhere in that subsection do you have C, under conditional use, you have C, site diagram has to have all this crap on it in one. And so, in my opinion, that's the checklist for a conditional use permit. So you went through and you've read sections 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are all my requirements. Now, what do I have to present? And the conditional use list is you have to have all the names, you have to have the legal address, you have a site diagram that has all the contours, where all the stuff's going. You have to include in your attachment your soil erosion plan, your FAA, your inventory, your road maintenance, your power purchase, your decommission, your liability, indemnification, et cetera. So that's the final checklist.
Okay.
So when I come to the planning commission, I said, I got this crap, look at it, and what else am I missing? So,
Yep,
pardon
that
my
makes
language,
sense.
I shouldn't use that word so much, but, does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly,
So then
yeah.
you would want the conditional use listed last. So that'd be like number 5.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Okay, so-
I don't care
Okay.
the order, I'm just saying, it would be nice to have everything, you know, things that go together, put together.
Okay.
So that when you're looking through, well, you know, when somebody comes before you, it's all nice and, you know, the first part is the design. We have a part that talks about the studies that have been done.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
yep, makes sense. So if just moving things around helps clarify, then yeah,
Yep,
we should do it.
yep.
Yep, I think that all makes sense.
So that being said, in each of those sections, are there things that have been missed? Are there things we need to amend, reword?
One thing I looked at some of the other plans that I had on hand. One thing that a lot of them had was, that's not listed in here, is anticipated construction schedule. You know, they have so many years, but just to have an idea of, you know, and so I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I just thought I'd throw it out here. Because I
Because the-
saw, it just, it says in there, but most of these just say, what's your anticipated construction schedule? What's your plan for construction? You know, and that's just what they said. They didn't put anything, it wasn't specific, like you have to tell us exactly when you're putting in the concrete, or it's just giving us an idea of how the construction's gonna go along.
So, Bill, they have like 2 years, right?
Yeah,
180
they do.
days to start.
Yep,
Once they apply for the building permit, 180 days to start and 2 years to finish. And we don't ask for that with, you know,
so,
residential homes and things
Right.
like that. But are you asking like?
For the CUP part.
Right.
Right.
Well, the CUP part, they have like 2 years to do it, but when they apply for the building permit,
They got started
180
in
days
6
to start, 2 years to finish.
and no other, yeah, and that's the thing, is no other CUP, I mean, this would, no, we don't ask for a anticipated construction schedule, but like I said, a lot of them that I read had that in there.
I guess the only time I would see it being necessary would be if they've got road maintenance agreements and stuff with townships or private people, then you should sort of have a timeline for that, so you can say, well, we're not gonna do construction hauling a bunch of stuff in or putting a bunch of material there in the middle of winter or something like that, but I don't know if it's really necessary.
Okay, that's fine. And then another one that a lot of them had was a plan for fire.
Back up to
So,
the other
oh, I'm sorry.
comment, the timeline. Who's gonna monitor what stage they're in, and, I mean, that's gonna be a tough one.
Well, I
but-
guess it wouldn't really, the way that Lauren's stating it, it wouldn't really be anything to monitor, it's just something, just like they say, hey, this is kind of the
Start
timeline
here
we're
and-
following, which,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of nice, I guess, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it's,
Norm, before you go off on that,
Mhm.
your thing back related to this other part about the setbacks and about the, you know, kind of a roadmap of how the thing is gonna get built. You know, in a lot of these jobs anymore, they come in with all of the structure or equipment, but it can't set where they're gonna actually build.
Mm-hmm.
So do the setbacks pertain to, or some type of a plan as to, they can't stack stuff against the fence, you know, that would cause like snow hazard or something like that,
I guess
prior to construction?
we would have to put it in there specifically, because if it's not a permanent thing, they can stack stuff.
and
like-
builders do that.
Well,
I mean,
I-
they'll put them right along the right of way, cause they assume they're not gonna be there very long,
Right,
but if something
if
happens.
something happens to where.
So it wouldn't be covered under the building permit setbacks.
Right.
It would have to be something you would specify about where they're going to store their.
Because one of it is exactly what one of them that I looked at said, location of any temporary assembly area used for during construction of the project.
Right,
And that, you know, think about it, that is a concern because, you know,
Like
when,
at the
yeah,
new school up there that they're building by the airport.
Yep.
You know, a lot of that stuff came in a long time ago, and then where they put that chain link fence around it, I totally agree with putting the fence there to catch everything and keep people out. But it also creates an issue with, not there so much, but like out in a rural area
Snow.
where it's snow
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, stuff catching in it and causing basically a snow fence right on the
Well,
property or the right of way.
The ag ordinance reflects setting things along the right of way.
Hay bales.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
well, other
it says more
structures
hay
too,
bales,
yeah.
it says, I think it says, I was gonna look it up, but.
And it was
it
governed
addresses-
by the north side and the west side or something, northwest, because the prevailing northwest winds, I think was what was discussed a long, 100 years ago, but I don't know if that's still.
And I guess when you're talking about this with the setting stuff there temporarily, if they got 2 years, it could be piled up there. And really what we're talking about here is not a thing that's going on your house. This is dealing with something that's gonna be potentially thousands of acres or a couple hundred acres, and that could be a lot of stuff stacked up.
Yep. And until they get like foundations or something like that for it, they don't want it very close to where they're, if there's that kind of structure going up, I don't know, but.
It's 517 traffic visibility. There shall be no obstructions such as buildings, structures, grain bins, trees, windbreaks, baled ag products, or other objects within 50 feet from the right-of-way. So if they did stack within 50 feet of the right-of-way, there is,
In an ag zone though.
that's traffic visibility 517. Let's see if it's in 10.
I believe ag was the only one that's in.
Traffic visibility.
So technically, because this is included basically and it can only be built in ag,
And commercial.
ag,
And
then it's also
so in the
under all the restrictions of the ag district.
In the commercial, 1017, number 2, structures, perennial or similar vegetation planted on or immediately adjacent to a road right-of-way shall be approved in writing by the planning administrator. No such vegetation, etc. So they have vegetation there. Traffic visibility triangle, as defined herein, shall be maintained at all road intersections, public and private driveways, rail crossings, and similar, as determined by the zoning administrator. And I think we've got something about a triangle in here somewhere, don't we have a picture?
There's one in the
of what that
definitions.
Visibility triangle.
Triangle, I mean, so that would govern the commercial, but as few commercial lots as we have right now.
The only thing that you would be worried about is if they got a large enough parcel of land together and then said, we wanna rezone this to commercial, and then put it on there.
Yeah. We didn't make Napa do it when they built Napa. I mean, you gotta be consistent, so if you're gonna do it, if you wanna do something like that, I would suggest you put it in the ordinance as a, we cover everything construction. Whether
Right.
Yeah,
it's a
I think
whole
it's-
building or a home or something, so again, to bury it in one section
Right.
doesn't cover you on all the other ones.
No, I think it'd be good for all construction to,
Well,
just so we know if they're gonna temporarily place something somewhere, whether it's machinery or, or whatever it may be, we know, there's no surprises,
And I'm not against that at all, because, when you look at some of the structures of some of these things are being built, where they come in with trucks and all this stuff, there's a lot of, apparatus there, and because of availability of a lot of stuff, they like to order it before they even know they're gonna use it, because you might be out 2 years to get some of that stuff, so.
Right, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't know if you say not in the setback area at all, or just like the ag thing where it's gotta be 50 feet away or something. But I don't think that's a bad idea for pretty much all the different construction. Because otherwise, essentially, you could have a bunch of stuff piled up for 2 years right there.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That wouldn't be something to add to Article 29, though. That would be, I don't know where you would put it, but
Well, you could. Totally put in each one under the
Mm-hmm.
traffic visibility.
I think that one requires some really in-depth thought, and maybe a better time to do it is when we do solar. Because then everybody will be in that mindset, we'll really think about it, it's another construction deal, and then that would be the next major
I
change.
mean, it's under the definitions, so you want that, whatever that wording is gonna be, should be in the definition. So you don't have to put that in every article.
Correct, correct. And maybe research and see if anybody else has wording we can steal.
Before we get past that one definition, we had a comment here on the thermal solar energy. Whenever you're ready for that.
yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah,
Come on up to the microphone.
thank you. I just saw in the I've been a little bit out of the loop here as this is developing. It looks fantastic so far. Concentrating solar thermal, I know we had talked about with the mirrors and the reflecting and the glint and the glare and all that, so that's prohibited. The next one is the solar energy as a radiant collector. That would be more specifically, like we mentioned, or like I mentioned, the thermal solar energy. But I don't know, I think that should probably be in the permitted use with the under 50 kW. Because what these are, these thermal solar energy collectors, they can either heat air or water. And it's basically just a black box that's mounted on the south side, either on the roof or on the vertical south face of a building. It's gonna, there's no such thing as a freestanding. They're either on the roof or on the building, so they're not separate structures or anything. But that would go along with the heating of the structure and fall, I think, in my view, fall more in the realm of the under 50 kW individual self-use kind of application. Instead of making it a whole, because it's not gonna really be covered under this, all the CUP stuff, because it's kind of a different animal. So I think, and I don't know, and it's not measured in KW. We'd be measured in MMBTU per square foot or whatever. It's not done very often. It was very common in the 70s. The solar tax credit that exists now at 26% does include thermal solar. And I tell people that thermal solar is actually more efficient than, I mean, more cost effective than photovoltaics. But in my recommendation, it should be under just a permitted use because they're very small, there's no reflection, it just it becomes an integral part of the structure to collect the thermal solar collection, either air or water, and then back into the residence. Or I've seen some commercial to go into like a commercial building. Peck Conveyors has a like they've got like 8. They're typically the size of a sheet of plywood, one collector, and they had like 8 of them, and that was like, wow, that's really big. So you may want to pull that out and just include in the under 50 kW definition and thermal solar energy collectors, if you want to even cover it at all.
It'd be a little bit like putting black shingles on your house and drawing
Yeah.
air out of your attic to heat your house.
It's a passive, it actually is a passive design feature. It can be added on to the vertical south face of a building. In the small farm energy project, it was in Hardington in 1978. They did a lot of work with that vertical south face collection systems. So it's been around for a while, whether you want to cover it or not, but I don't know that it's appropriate in the CUP area.
Yeah, I guess the way you're making it sound with the thermal solar and what the definition there, well, we already talked about moving the definitions out of this article, but this article is dealing with the solar energy conversion system and we're defining that. basically, I guess, it doesn't say it in here, maybe we need to change that, but as the photovoltaics with the solar panels. That would make it a little more clear.
So, and SECS is a solar energy conversion system. And whether that conversion of that sun's energy is into thermal or electricity, doesn't matter. I mean, you can just broaden that definition a little bit, and I think still keep it appropriate.
Well, if that definition covers either electric or heat, is there a reason to even have a definition for thermal solar energy?
No,
Because
oh,
it's
I'm sorry, the
fair-
SECS is over 50 kW.
For a
correct?
CUP.
Okay, yes,
Anything under does not, it's permitted.
okay,
So if the definition we have right now covers the heat side and the electric side,
then we're
then
done.
everything's covered.
Yeah, okay.
Because I would highly doubt you'd put a heat system on your house that's greater than 50 kW.
No,
I mean, so you're covered anyway, and so
Yeah.
then, because I think that solar energy definition was just meant to say it's little electrons coming from the sun and we're harvesting them. I
Right.
think that was the intent of that definition.
and I think the 50 kW again is kind of like, it's a little bit of apples and oranges to thermal. I mean, there's 748 BTUs per kW, I think. But, so there's a relationship between them, but you generally don't measure the heat in kW. But the chances you're gonna run into this are pretty slim to none.
Basically, the only commercial uses are the concentrating solar thermal, which
That one,
we,
and that's a whole,
already
that's another different
addressed.
animal, because you're increasing the ambient sun's radiation per square foot with reflection and
Right.
and
what
all
I'm
that
saying is the
stuff.
only commercial use of it we're already covering, so
Right.
the rest of it,
Sounds like
we don't
we
need.
Just take thermal back off, leave it as solar energy, and we should be covered.
Okay.
Yeah,
Either
I think we're good.
Okay, I just wanted
Yeah.
to call that out.
No, but it's good to make sure everything's covered.
Yeah,
Yeah, with the 750, I'm gonna say 750 BTUs per kilowatt at 50, that's 37,500 BTUs. So,
per foot per minute, per
Yeah.
square foot per minute.
yeah,
That's hot, that's cooking.
your feet would be toasty in the winter.
It's a wall heater.
But they do work, I've got several of them, and they do work.
I do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So one thing I did want to revisit is the setback from the right-of-way line and a property line. So I did some calculations on squares of different sizes. And when you look at the egg zoned, because I think most of these are probably gonna go in the egg zoned, our minimum lot, unless you're a business, it's 5. Your minimum lot is 20 acres. So that's about 933 feet by 933 feet. So if with a 330-foot setback all around that, of that 20 acres, you can use 1.7 acres. And with the 7 acre per megawatt, that's 0.2 megawatts. If you decrease that 330 to 200, you can use 6.5 acres, which is 32% of the property. If you go to 100, you can use 12.3 acres, which is 62% of the property. And at the 50-foot setback, which is in egg, you can use about 16 acres or 80% of the property. And at that maximum, you can get at most 2.3 megawatts on 20 acres. So that's a 20 acre square. If you go to 40 acres at 330 feet all the way around that you cannot use, you're left with 10 acres, which is 25%. At a 200 foot, you're left with 19 acres or 49%. At 100 foot, you can use 73% or 29 acres, and at 50 foot, you can use 85% or 34 of those acres. So when you go to a quarter, which is 160 acres, at that 330-foot setback, you can only use 56% of the property, or 90 acres. And of course, as you reduce that setback, if you go to a 200-foot setback, you can use 72% of that property. At 640 acres, which is a whole section at 330 feet, you can use 77% of the property, 85% of the property, 93% of the property, and at 50 foot, you can use 96% of the property. So that blanket setback of 330 feet, and I'm assuming that you don't own any land around you, so you have to abide by that 330, really reduces the use of your property on that. And I know the reason the 330 was put in there was because of the ag zone and the animal feeding operations. And I think it's worth vetting out that conversation a little bit, because they are not the same thing in their influence on the properties around them. One being, an animal feeding operation has a point location, whereas the solar farms are looking to use an area, and they aren't just a point location. There's also, we talked about can you see it, hear it, smell it? Those were the three main ones, and they all have different factors in that. So I think at least what we need to consider is, like Lynn County did, I think it was Lynn County, did, if you had so many acres, this was your setback. And as your acres increased, you had a larger setback, but because it didn't take so much of your property away from use, if you will. Because if you're gonna have 40 acres and the road's out here and everything back here is just farmland or whatever, most of your influence is off the front of the road. It's not around the side yards and the back, et cetera. So I do think it's worth at least getting so you can use 60% of your property at least. And so if you went, for example, I did all these percentages and I circled where maybe it would be a compromise, and at 20 acres, if you wanted to use 62% of your property, you could accept 100-yard or 100-foot setback. With that 100-foot setback on 40 acres, you could use 73% of the property. Once you go to a quarter, which is 160 acres, if you went to a 200-foot setback, you can still use 72% of the property. And at that 640, you can use 85% of the property. And so I think those are maybe some more reasonable compromises. And when you're looking at 5 acres, because technically these are businesses, and when they go out in the ag zone, they could say, well, all I have to do is buy 5 acres because I'm a business. And if you've got a 330-foot setback, you can use 2% of your land. And if you've got a 100-foot setback, you can use 32% of it. And at a 50-foot setback, you can only use 62% of it because they're so small. And that 50-foot, we certainly can't go less than 50 foot because that's the general setback for everything else. But I do think it's worth at least visiting one more time before we say 330 foot is what we're going with. If you're putting 330 foot because of the animal feeding operations, it would be better to go back and visit that than to penalize this and to have the conversation again about that. But to say, because you can't do it, I can't do it, is not a good way to plan your zoning. So I'm certainly open to opinions on that.
Sure, your point on the, how many megawatts, like on a 5 acre thing was like 2 point something?
So if you had the 330-foot setback, you could only use 2% of the property, which is 0.1 acres, which is 0.015 megawatts, which is essentially 15 kilowatts.
Okay, so in the real world about putting these farms out, what is a
Economical
base minimum
size,
base minimum size that
Oh,
they
that
have
they
to
do?
put in?
You know, I'm not an expert, you might have a comment on this because you work in that industry, but if someone's gonna come in and put some solar panels in, do they need 50 megawatts? Do they need 100 megawatts? I mean, it's 100 to get state permitting, correct?
Right, but I thought
So basically, once you go over 50 kilowatts, then they have the power purchase agreement where you have to buy all, sell all. So that's going to eliminate pretty much everything, just from, not anything to do with our zoning, but just from the power company's standpoint, they're gonna eliminate anything from 50 kilowatts on up to wherever the economic threshold is. Which, that economic threshold, if you look at all the projects that are going in, are all well over 50
Well-
megawatts. So if you're looking at something that's, say, 50 megawatts at, just say 7 acres per megawatt, you're looking at 350 acres covered of solar panels. Now, if you're looking at 350 acre block of, I mean, of
Right.
anything, whether it's just a silent building or it's solar panels or whatever, if you're looking at a solid 350 acres, 330 feet doesn't sound unreasonable whatsoever.
Well, if it's 300, if the 50 megawatt requires basically 350 acres to build that site, then we're already at what she was talking about, like a section of land, which with 350 acres out of the middle of 640, would leave you with how big a setback would
At the
that
current, you had your percentage there,
yep,
at the
at
current
the-
330 feet, how many percentage of a section?
490 acres is left.
So
Yeah.
you could get
So on a section of land, they could build a 50 megawatt
easily,
easily.
70, if you use 7.
well, yeah, you could,
7 acres a megawatt, seem reasonable?
that's
So
what,
that's 70
I-
megawatts. You
We
could
had-
build
But I'm
a
just saying
section.
though, what I'm saying is, is if we're looking at reducing the setback, which is still in the conversation, but you have to also look at if you're gonna make a rule for something that's not feasible for somebody to build in the first place.
right, reasonably, we're not looking at any projects that are going to be these smaller ones. We're not looking at any project that's going to even attempt to locate on 20 acres. Because that's not even going to be remotely close to the economic threshold. Even if you could cover 100% of that 20 acres, you're not going to, nobody's gonna build that because you're not gonna get a power agreement with the power
Yeah,
company because you're not going to be
someplace.
big enough.
A true statement today, but technology is changing that, because one of the biggest weaknesses of solar power is it's intermittent, it's only on during the day, okay? The battery storage systems that can provide firm power out of these plants during peak times or during cloudy times, during night times, this is changing the value of the power because it's become firm power, where the source is intermittent, but the output is firm. So I'm not sure that we want to make those kind of assumptions with technology, not so much a solar panel. Solar panel's been the same for 40 years, since the space program. It's the same monocrystal itself, but everything around it is changing pretty rapidly, and that's something that the economics and stuff that's the industry's problem. I don't know that we want to tie our zoning to something that's moving that fast. So there typically is, when you look at whether it's oilseed crushing, renewable fuels, renewable whatever, there's always a middle ground that's a tough road to hoe. The small is small, and it's because it's offsetting retail, it'll work. When you get up to the big, you got volume, you got capacity, it'll work, but it's always that middle ground that's tough. I like the idea of the sliding scale, because it makes it available. It makes it available for the smaller scale, potentially locally owned type of operations that can come in. And I've seen this in Burke County, where locals have put projects together on a 20-acre piece, and it's worked very well. Their setbacks were 50 foot, in the middle of nowhere, nobody cared. But your point is well taken, that a 300-acre block of anything is a little overwhelming and needs some space from a property line, even though there may not be anything else around, and there's certainly much further setbacks if there are things around. But this is from a property line in the middle of an ag zone. And if you consider the see here smell, there's no smell, there's no here. But you can see, the farmers go right up to the property line, right? They're hitting the fence post, okay? Those chemicals come over, the dust comes over, you can't see anything with the crops up, you know, so they get to farm it all. These guys should be able to farm most of it. You know, so that's why I like the sliding scale, I think would be appropriate. You know, to be welcoming to the smaller, to be open, because you probably want, I think, in my view, in decentralized development, we're better off with a bunch of smalls than one big. And in this case especially so, because the infrastructure's not built to take one big. And would have to be upgraded at high cost to do it and deliver it and then distribute it again. We're much better off doing distributed plants, not so many eggs in one basket. We can utilize the existing infrastructure and put the power production where the power use is. So I think that's a great idea to have a scale.
Yeah, I'll be honest, this summer when we had this task force, there was a few that I saw that were that sliding scale. And I did like it, because I did realize, like what Sherry said, you know, when you put that 330 and try to put that over every type of property size, it doesn't really, it's not really fair.
And paid taxes the same on all of it.
Right. Because, yeah, I still want to see that 330 if you're talking about a section or whatever. I mean, definitely. But, you know, when you have, like, you know, you said, when you have 40 acres or something like that, that 330 takes a bite out of it.
So then the other part of that discussion that was at our solar task force was it worth adding that complexity into this now? Or since the economics and everything are the way they are, do you leave that for later if something were to change? And keep it simpler now?
No, and that's because when I brought it up this summer, that's what the discussion was. You know, do we want to go into that complexity now or wait till the issue comes up?
Well, we've done it with, I mean,
Yeah,
building sizes and all this stuff and all the residential districts. I mean, every time you turn around, we're increasing the size and doing that. And I tell you, kind of get your feet in the water. And I don't know, I don't necessarily say that I'm a proponent of the 330-foot thing. Depending upon, you know, like, if they're only gonna come out and buy, you know, 5 acres or whatever, if they list themselves as commercial, they have to realize that, I already know there's gotta be something else going on there that they can't produce enough to get on the grid to market anything out of there anyway. Because they can't produce enough, you know, other than just a homestead, but.
for 50 kilowatts, well, how many acres? I mean, that, we've had so many things plugged around, but,
Not any
Small,
acres.
I mean, you could put 100 acres, the footprint of this 100 kilowatts in
so 50 kilowatts would be,
The size of this room.
okay.
Yeah, that should still, that's that middle ground
Mm-hmm.
that you gotta let that be. That's a hard nut to crack. But when you start looking at megawatts,
Yep.
start looking at multiple acres, you know, it's not up to us to determine where that threshold is, I believe, but you could make it pretty simple to a property line and say 40 acres and less, 100 foot, 41 acres and up, 250 or 300 or whatever, and then give that discrimination, because people are gonna look at this. I just shut off a project today. I had 2 emails with Omaha zoning. I'm done. I want wet, 9 solar panels, 9 panels. They wanted a wet stamp. They wanted engineering load analysis. Are you kidding me? 9 panels? I mean, no. So sometimes people just read this off the internet and just cross Yankton off the list. We'll never even know they came and went. They're window shopping. They see 330, they don't want solar. I'll go somewhere that does. That's exactly what I told the zoning guy in Omaha. See, you guys still don't like solar panels, huh? Because it's a policy, but it also expresses if you want this development or you don't. Just like when the utility person was here, they said, well, we don't really want it, so this is what we do in our policy. We give you 3 cents for it. That's kind of what we're doing here. If we want them to come, drop the number. If we don't want them, leave it there.
Can you make a hybrid plan by, because like you're showing a right-of-way line and property line delineating a change of ownership, where if you go right-of-way because they're gonna need access to it from a roadway to get in to service the panels anyway, would there be any help in shortening up the setback from the right-of-way and then adjusting from property line? You know, I'm not sure if you're following what I'm saying, but, you know, 330 feet off the road, that's a long ways back off the road. So then for access to it and things like that, where it could be close, because even, you know, farmsteads and stuff like that, if you're gonna build something, you kinda wanna be closer to the road, so you're not driving clear to the far end of the property to get something done, I guess. You know, the rivers, lakes, and streams, well, that's probably an environmental thing that's set there, there ain't much we can do about that, but if you shorten the line between the right-of-way, where it's gonna be the road access, and then narrow it up, or go 100 feet around it.
So
thing,
doesn't
it'd be done.
I guess, doesn't the property line delineating a change in ownership, say that the right-of-way line was, whatever, say it was 50 foot, and wouldn't the property line delineating change in ownership, wouldn't that still cover you there as well? Like, say that it was 50 foot, you want to be for the right-of-way, so you were within 50 foot of the right-of-way, well, you're still, that's closer than 330 to the next property on the other side of the right-of-way. Or does it not count anymore because you had a right-of-way between you?
But by doing that, it would give you,
What I guess what I'm trying to get at is if you've got a shorter, does the right-of-way line matter that much?
It's the road. To me,
Right,
the
I know.
right-of-way is all the roads.
Right, so
right?
does the distance away from the road matter if you've got a wider thing with the property line deal?
well, it would.
Because you've
in
got
my
a property
mind, I
line on the
guess-
other side, so like if you counted, if you said there was no right-of-way line, you could be right up against the road. Minus your normal, whatever, 50-foot setback. So does that right-of-way now, so you got a 100-foot right-of-way, does that count as part of your 330 property line?
Well, I guess what I was looking at, Chris, would be, even if you left the 330 feet property line on both, on your side yard or whatever you wanna call it, but your right-of-way one, it would give you, what, 280 feet more space, even if you kept the 330 foot line on the back side. Now, on the side yards, I'm thinking what you're saying is you're given the right-of-way of only 100 feet, so then the property lines on both sides of you.
Yeah, so like you're saying, the front yard there, is
Right.
if you reduce the right-of-way but don't reduce property line, then the one looking at you across the road there has only got 100 foot or whatever distance, where the other 3 sides got a 330 foot distance.
Yeah.
Or, so is that the way it's counted? Or, like if you were going to conform with the zoning ordinance the way it was wrote, Now, say that your right of way was 50 foot, so you got 50 foot along the road, and you got 330 foot around, and the guy that's sitting across the road, he's essentially got a 50 foot setback from you, and you'd be in conformance.
Well, the property line's outside the right of way. So you'd have your 50 foot here, your right of way, and he'd have 50 foot back.
Okay, so you'd have,
So you'd have that space of the right of way, whatever that is.
so you'd have 50 plus 100 foot right of way, say, and then 50, so you'd have 200 foot along the road. There'd be that setback area, the rest of the other three sides would be 330, and you'd be in conformance if you reduce the right,
But kind of what you're saying though is you're gonna make a 330-foot C around the guy's property.
right, that's what I'm getting at, is how do you, does that?
He could build closer to
count?
the road as long as he's 330 feet from both property lines on the frontage.
Right,
You know,
that,
so,
I was
I mean,
wondering, like,
And that's.
so if we reduce the right of way one or the property line one, they almost gotta be the same as each other.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you could have a situation where you can be right up against, right next to somebody on this side and have a big area around, or
yeah.
vice versa.
I think it's probably, in my mind anyways, the place to start to look at a little bit what Sherry was talking about is it's gonna adjust, the setback is gonna have to adjust with the size of the property that they're going to.
And you have to remember, we have that 1320 from residents. You know, so that's, nobody's gonna be living right across the road unless they sign a waiver. They have to be a quarter mile away from the edge of the project.
So that's still included in.
Again, that's not you have to remember, an egg feeding operation is a point. This is a footprint, and it would be a quarter mile from the edge of that footprint. You're not from the front of it, you're not from where the address is, you're from every section of it, so you'd have to be a quarter mile away from the whole project.
That's a powerful combination, I think, too, because it leaves the power in the hands of the property owner for them to have to negotiate with.
Right.
But if you lower the setbacks, it attracts them in to be able to utilize the property that they purchased, but it still leaves the power in the hands of the people to say, I don't care, you know, give me my $500 a year or whatever, and I'll put shades up. So I like leaving the hands in the power of the residents to do that with a big setback like that, you know?
So it gives them a voice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the 100 or 50, even less than 40 acre, and 200 feet or greater than 40 acres is my recommendation. Because otherwise, those numbers were just, you're telling people don't show up.
So is there a way then, because if they come in and wanna do a commercial business thing, would they have to go rezone then? What I'm just saying is, basically, could we set a bare minimum on the lot size? 20 acres would be is in the ag district now, and then to change the if a guy went to the setback thing and change that, like he said, it's kind of a sliding thing with two different sizes or whatever, but we're basically eliminating somebody coming and buying 5 acres and trying to do something commercially, right?
So, when you take a 5 acre, if you could use every square inch of it, you can't even put a megawatt on it. You're 0.7. So I would highly doubt anybody's gonna buy
Yeah, that's what I'm,
5 acres. So, even at 20 acres, if you could use every square inch of it, you're just under 3 megawatts. And to have somebody, and now maybe you get someone creative and have 20 acres in every township or every section of every township, but that just becomes cost prohibitive to
Yeah.
spread them out like that. So and at 40 acres, if we're still sticking with the 7 megawatts per acre, every square inch of it, you're just under 6 megawatts.
So, in reality though, and say putting these farms up with, you know, the big megawatt thing, they still have to be able to access a grid to get it out of there, right?
Yep, they've got to have some agreement with either BY or Northwestern or
Right,
somebody.
but it has to be someplace, because they all look, because I know they're, you know, in the farm magazines and stuff, the last few years, there was, you know, if you live near, they had pictures of the big towers and stuff, and if you live near one of these, you can contact us,
Yeah,
you know, and stuff like,
Yeah,
like
I
that
got
place.
one.
And it's kinda like, okay, so, but, so that isolates a lot of, for a very far distance anyway, to be that, so, you know, it's kinda like we talked about in the pig barns and stuff like that, when you started laying out these circles about where they could be built to where they have access to those lines. And, you know, it costs money to bury wire.
Yeah, it does.
that's big time. And they're trying to get, they just came out with an article, and I can't remember where I read it. They're trying to get, to tie the east and the west United States together across the Missouri River. And they're talking about potentially putting a transmission line south of I-90 between the border and I-90 and going across. Because right now, and I guess I didn't even think about it, there isn't a line that crosses the Missouri. Our dam will feed some west and some east, but nothing goes back and forth
Back and
right
forth,
now,
yeah.
is what the article said. So there's a lot of stuff that in the billions numbers were thrown out there to get that done. Certainly won't happen in 10 years, but maybe, I guess, if they can get the money together. You know, so, is there gonna be a lot of stuff on 40 acres? Probably not.
Yeah.
160 acres? That's when you start maybe getting, because you can get 160 here and maybe a mile away, you get another 160 to get some in an area to make it scalable on that.
And it still becomes an issue of being able to connect into a line someplace.
Yep, no different than wind towers. So they have that challenge too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is the technology we wanna put the welcome mat out for. Because if, you know, even though I have wind turbine, I've used them, I put them up, I don't care for the big ones.
They
You know,
have.
I'd like to see everything triple when it comes to wind, because you have to hear, see, well, I don't call it necessarily smell, but vibrations, all kinds of stuff with wind turbines. I'm for them, but all that stuff would be triple for wind. They should have a high hurdle to go over. Solar is the one we want, because it just sits there for 30 years and it works.
So.
So for a sliding scale, where would you start the scale?
So I had circled my numbers on there of what I thought was at least a reasonable use of land, and at 100 foot, the 40 acres and under, at 40 acres, you could use 73% of the property at 100 foot. And if you go to 160, I had 200 there for 72% on that.
Say that again?
Just the number, so 40 acres at 100 foot is 73% usage. 160 acres at 200 foot is 72% usage. And I didn't do any calculations between there. I guess I could have done an 80 or something like that, but, you know,
The
and
bigger the farms are gonna probably start at 5 meg. Probably to start with. Where does that?
so if you wanted a 5 meg on 40 acres, you'd need 50 foot, because that gets you 4.9. So at 160, that 200 foot setback gets you 16.5 megawatts on
So
160.
maybe 80 is the
So 80 and under 100 foot, anything over 80, 200 foot? Because land sold in 80s, you don't see too many hundreds and all that. Guess you can always split things.
Yeah, probably more often than not.
Yeah.
Won't be a true 80, but it'll be an 80.
Yeah.
I think given the protections that are already there to residences, municipalities, I think that's a good way to go.
So you would say, you'd make 80 acres the break point,
Yeah.
under
maybe.
would be 100 foot, over would be 200 foot, and then what, get rid of the 330 completely, or have that for some higher tier?
You know, the 200 foot on the 640, you could get 78 megawatts on there. I mean, you're not, because you're gonna have it's not very many places in the county that you don't have roads all the way around. So you're going to have to be offset on that. It's not too many where you have two sections together and you can just swoosh them on through. I don't know. There are some where there's no developed road. I live by one, I guess, but there's 3 or 4 different landowners that would have to go in on it and accept
Yeah.
that to be able to build right over. But there's a change in property line, so you'd have to abide by it unless they owned it all.
Yeah,
You'd have-
that'd be
you'd
the
have to
quarter
own the two
mile.
sections.
Yeah, that'd be the quarter mile.
I don't know of anybody in the county that owns 2 contiguous sections. Can you think of any plots that are that big? I can't think of any plots that are that big. Of course, it doesn't mean someone can't come in and give you 20,000 an acre and buy it all.
Yeah, money talks.
I think the 80 acres is simple.
Yeah.
You do 100 and 200.
And you'd use that for the right-of-way and the property line?
That makes sense.
I think that would be, and you could even,
The right-of-way could even be reduced, actually, if you were gonna stick with 200, because you figure, what is the minimum right-of-way? Isn't it like 90 feet?
66.
66?
66, isn't it?
Okay, so you got 66 plus a minimum of 50 on the other side. Which I guess you wouldn't really count that, cause you got a 50 on, no matter where you're at, but,
It would have to, the right-of-way line would have to go completely along the frontage of the property though, correct? Because it's right-of-way all the way along there, so no matter what, whatever we set that number at, it's that way clear across. And then the adjoining property line starts where the right-of-way ends and goes around it then, and then you have that setback. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm better with pictures.
So if you had a 50-foot setback on the right-of-way, at minimum, you'd have 166 feet.
So your right-of-way is 33 foot on the property itself, is that correct?
Yeah,
From the
33
center of the
feet on each
road,
side.
33
Center of
foot.
the road to the property.
So from the front here, my property line, I already have 33 foot on the front of my property line, right? And from that, we're going another. So what do we want that other to be?
I think that's what Dennis said, 50 feet, because if you have 50 feet and the minimum right-of-way is 33 on each side, that gives you 166
Okay,
setback.
so right
regardless.
now, in our ordinance, we have 50 foot,
Yep.
correct?
mhm.
Off the front. So do we need a right-of-way? Now,
I
the
think-
commercial might be different. What's the commercial front?
50 and 25 on the sides.
50? Okay, so it's all 50. So do we need a right-of-way listed if we're okay with it being that 33 plus the 50 on this property? So you're 83 foot off the center of the road.
So basically, the minimum your way is, like Bill said, 166 feet without anything listed. for
If you
right-of-way.
take both setbacks.
Building to building.
Right.
Right. So you could have a house here and a house here, and they are that far apart.
Yep.
So are we okay with just not having a right-of-way setback? And then just focus on the property line delineating a change in ownership.
But the change of ownership setback would start after the right of way where it comes off of the road. At the change of-
So you have, to me, you've got the road sitting out front, you have the left property line, and you have the right property line. So that would be, how far do I have to be off that fence line? So right now, we're saying we have to be 330 foot off that fence line.
Yeah,
And-
that's right,
Yeah.
but in your drawing there, if you, the change of property line would be on your right and left,
Yes,
after the right-of-way setback. So.
yep, so this is 50 foot here,
50 foot there.
And then I'm going to
if you
have-
wanted to put 100 foot, yeah,
this here, so this would be 100 foot. And then
Yes.
I'd have one on this side,
right,
and I'm gonna have one on the back,
yes.
so I
But
have 100
But
foot
the
here.
100-foot one doesn't start till the 50-foot setback for the right-of-way up on the road.
But there's no right of way on the right-hand side between property
I
lines.
understand that.
Okay, I'm not getting it.
Okay,
You draw it.
this is your right-of-way.
Yes.
It runs from this property line to this property line. But if you're gonna have the 50-foot setback, that's where it stops.
Inside.
But now you've gotta build 100, you have a setback from the change of ownership property line here, that doesn't start till right here.
Well, it overlap. Dennis, when it just overlap up.
Yeah,
Up to the road.
it just does this number.
Well, that's, technically, that's probably the way it should be, but if you're gonna say 50 feet from the right of way, I guess, see, I'm confused with it being, everybody's got a 50-foot setback from the right of way back to here no matter what.
Yeah, this line is erased.
So it just comes out in a big
So this-
C then.
Yeah, you just got a square
Yeah,
inside
okay.
the square.
I'm okay on that, I'm just, was bringing it up as a point that if I'm responsible for this right of way clear to this change of ownership line,
Yep.
then I'm allowed to use 50 feet here.
Yeah, I think I would just
I-
say that
I-
we are double excluding this. We're excluding it because of our 50-foot here, and we're excluding it because this is a different owner. So this is double excluded on all these corners.
Yeah, they're just overlap.
So I can't use this because of my front right away.
Right,
I can't
right.
use these because of new owner or a different owner.
Yeah,
Does that make
I
sense?
don't care, I'm just trying to make sure that it's clear that somebody doesn't come and build something and then, you know, from
Yes.
the change of ownership.
Absolutely.
But technically, the change of ownership line, the change of ownership person on the other side of the fence has the same 50-foot, at least the same 50-foot setback
Has a 50-foot, yeah.
of what I would have.
Normally, yep, so if we don't have a change in ownership, then it's 50 foot off the property line. Unless they plat everything together.
Which in that case, they probably would.
Yeah, if you bought several and you're gonna lay it out, you'd plat them all together. So where are we at with the right of way then? Are we good not putting it in and just going with the 50 off the front?
So if you take into account that it's 116 feet would be the comparable, because if you're gonna count the other 50 to make it 166, then you gotta count the 50 around the other sides as well. So if we're looking at it to be direct comparison, your right of way without having anything in there for the right of way, you've got basically 116 feet from the other guy's fence. Whereas the property line, if we made that 100 foot, or if you're over 80 acres, 200 foot, then you've got 100 foot or 200 foot from the fence. So if you were just comparing it to the other guy's fence across the road from you, without anything for right of way, you've got 116 feet minimum.
The 66-foot right away and then the 50-foot
66,
setback.
but the 50.
With your 50 and
And the
the
right-of-way
66,
And the
that's 116 foot
Yeah.
minimum that you'd have.
Minimum, then they've gotta meet 50.
Right, but also on your side yard there, your property line,
Oh, yeah.
that your neighbor has to meet 50 as well, so,
Yeah.
I mean, compare apples to apples, we're not
Yep,
gonna
yep.
count that on the other side. But, so basically, you're looking at at 116-foot minimum without having anything in there for right-of-way line. Do you want more than 116, or should we just say right-of-way line, if you're over 80 acres, then add whatever it is. You'd have, since you already got 50, we'd have to bump it up to about 100, say. So then if you had 100 plus your 66, you'd be at 166, you'd still be slightly closer than that 200 foot to the other guy's fence, but.
Going back, Dennis said this earlier, when they build these, the controls, that's gonna be by the entrance, by the road is close. So you're not talking about panels right by, you're talking more of a structure for the controls?
Yes, and then there would be the gate, the entry to the barn is typically gonna be fenced.
Yeah.
The entry area is gonna be limited, that's gonna be your access in.
So the panels wouldn't start there, they'd be a little further back. You're just talking about a control house.
Generally, your connection line would be at the road
Yeah.
out of there anyway, so they would, like the panel, power from the panels would come to the collection point at the, basically by the gates. and
So it'd
go-
be no different
that's
than
where the
having
service
a
stuff would be.
accessory building along the right of way. So the
Well,
50
maybe that's how you would design it, but I mean, the way our ordinance is, you could put the panels right up 50 foot away from the fence.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, maybe you would design it that way, just saying that's not what this says, that you have to do it that way.
Correct.
And, I guess I'm just looking at this, trying to make the property line and the right-of-way line be similar to each other so that you're not, the guy across the road from you looking at it doesn't have like a way shorter distance between it than the guys on the sides of it just because you got a road between you.
I think I'd keep them the same. I would do the 80 acres and lower 100 foot, anything over 80 acres, 200 foot, both of them. For
Keep it
your
simple.
point.
Then it
80
makes
acres
the
above.
guy across the road farther away from you, but than the side ones, I mean, it's not equal,
Well,
but.
But the person driving down the center of the road, you know, that's,
So 80 acres and below is 100.
yep.
On
and then
both of them.
Over 80. Yeah, because we said under and over, but we didn't say 80.
Yeah, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
which one you
Yeah.
pick, just one has to be, equal to or
Well,
Yeah.
like
greater
you
than.
said, 80 acres and below is 100, 81 acres and above is 200.
Yep. So anything greater than 80. So, and if people want to change, have a different front right of way, I'm okay with that. It's not a killer for me. But I do see Chris's point about the side landowners having a greater cushion than the guy across the road. So,
But in either case, that's not where the guy sleeps at night. That's not where he's making his breakfast.
unless he's written a waiver. He could be, and that's, you know, and they could be the owner lives across the road, so. Yeah,
Well, but think of it, either way, with our quarter-mile notification thing, the guy across the road still has something to say about it
Exactly.
before
Yep,
they were
they can
built.
show up.
And he's got a buffer, so if he's looking at it, it's just because he's driving down the road.
mhm,
It's like a glance over, the other panels are still there. It's not looking out his window every morning.
yep. Yep, so, I don't know if anybody else has an opinion, like I said, I'm flexible on this one. If you wanna just get rid of the front right away, I'm okay with that too.
And just use the 50.
And just use the 50 standard, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's all a preference thing.
Mhm.
I think make it simpler, just make them both the same. The 100, 200, the break at 80.
Everybody okay with that? Seeing some nods, okay.
Your surety requirement section that you have highlighted, you said you don't think we need.
You know,
I think that's pretty much covered in the
in the other stuff,
financial
that's,
resources.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe that whole thing can just be deleted if it's covered under the liability, the indemnity, and the, my pages are out of order here now. The escrow account is in there. So, and I don't know if the state's attorney has read all that stuff and made sure we can do all that stuff.
They, did get CC'd on the same thing you
Okay.
did, so.
That doesn't mean they read it.
So, or you probably didn't hear back from the state.
No, we never did. I don't think they want to make a call.
Yeah. Okay.
So are we voting to erase that section, or what are we doing?
I think so.
I'm good with erasing it, but I didn't want to erase it without anybody else having eyes on it.
I think this was just copy and pasted from a different one, wasn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then we kind of made our own stuff. So, I don't know. The $100,000 security, that's basically a bond.
Yeah, I think
In
that
the section where we
we've
talk
got-
about having a bond, we didn't put a dollar amount on it, we just said that it had to cover the decommissioning cost.
Right.
So I don't think that it needs a specific dollar amount. Cause 100,000 is gonna be way too little for a big project and maybe too much in some other cases. Any other points on the draft? Going once, twice? One more, okay. So I guess go ahead and rewrite again.
Do we want to try to have a hearing next time with these changes, or do we want to have another meeting?
See, next would be November. I mean, we can still make changes if we want to after hearing, but, or at the hearing,
At the hearing?
but
And then you're just gonna vote to send whatever you change to the county commission?
right, we'll have the draft, and then if there is any changes, we'll mark it on there. And we have to have one hearing, and then we have to have the next one where we can go for
No.
approval.
We'd have a hearing in November, you'd recommend it
So we can recommend at the next hearing, then
with
first hearing
changes, and then in December, it would go to the county commission for two
for two.
meetings.
So the plan.
Yeah, I think we can go for that.
Excuse me. All right,
Hearing next time. Just before Thanksgiving.
hearing next. Do you want to start an Article 26 discussion, or put that off until maybe next time?
Seeing the time, we could probably.
What do we wanna, what should we be discussing? What do you wanna,
I
what's
think
the target?
Don had
on
talked
this?
about bringing it up just to start the discussion about what we want to do with Article 26.
So just look at changes or
Yeah.
updating, okay,
Just come with ideas.
okay.
Don's still on.
I think, Don, are you still there?
I'm here.
Good deal. Well, we're talking about wind next time,
Or
so.
did he want to talk? talk.
Unless you had something tonight, Don? No? Okay. So we'll just go with a wind discussion next time, I guess?
I think Gary mentioned, it. Donna talked about, they like the task force format, so when we get to the wind, create another task force
Okay.
to deal with that.
We don't create a task force from planning commission, that'd be a county commission deal.
But you may want to be on it.
Maybe. So I guess for next time, for the wind discussion, I guess if there's, everybody should look over Article 26. If you have any ideas, concerns, things to bring up, we can make basically a list of stuff to send to that task force whenever it is established.
Correct.
So that could be a pretty quick discussion for next time, so.
Yeah, I don't expect maybe one application and maybe one or two plats, so should have plenty of time to discuss.
Okay. Hearing might take a while. Never know. But, unless there's anything to add, is there any public comment?
Can I go back? So just looking at wind, so all those definitions that are at the beginning of wind, we would throw those at the beginning too, as well. Okay.
Okay, public comment? None? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Have a motion
Second, Loest.
and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.